public event where Model Ts drove up a very steep hill competing for the best time. Development in this area eventually prevented any future hill climbing events. Decades later, an opportunity arose to reenact this historic event. To tell us about this, we have 4 in-house studio guests. Participant Juan Stevens drove her Model T up this hill, as did Glenn French. Automotive professor Leonard Glick coordinated the entire event, and master mechanic Jeff Hood is a historian on the hill climb. So everybody, welcome.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Joanne. Great.
We appreciate you coming in. So, Jeff, let's start with you. Give our audience the history of the hill climb.
Well, John, the hill, which is now Hill Street, was always known as Shell Hill. Shell Oil drilled the first oil well, Alameda's #1, at the top of the hill, right next to the street. And their Shell equipment shops and warehouses were at the bottom of the hill. And there's stories that the oil field workers could maybe drive up the side of the hill, but they often took a shortcut down the hill. And eventually it was paved, it became a street, and now known as Hill Street. It's a very steep hill. It's 1/10 of a mile and a 22% grade, which means that in driving forward 100 feet, you also go up 22 feet in elevation. So in 1/10 of a mile, you go up about 116 feet, which is about the size of a 10 or 11-story building. So it's a pretty steep hill. And it's always been the place, if you got a new car, you went to the hill to see how well it went up the hill. That was just something that people always did, to try to drive their car up the hill. Now the Model T Club, since it was formed, we always have taken a monthly tour. We go somewhere to lunch, we go to a point of interest, or even just on a drive in the car. But we try to get the cars out once a month and go somewhere, and we still do that. On one of these lunch tours back in the early days, they were going to lunch and driving past the hill, and the tour leader stopped and he said, any car that can't make it up the hill isn't worthy to continue on the tour. So they all tried it. There were 7 cars, and they eventually all made it. A couple of them struggled. One of them had to turn around and go up in reverse. But they all made it. They went on, they had lunch, and they had a great time. Going up in reverse happens because there's no fuel pump on a Model T. It's a gravity-fed fuel system. The gas tank is under the seat, the carburetor's down low on the engine. But if you have maybe a half a tank or less gas in the tank, and you start going up a big hill, there's a chance, especially a steep hill like this, that your carburetor becomes level with the fuel or even higher than the fuel. Fuel flow stops, you run out of gas, the car stops. But if you go in reverse, now your fuel tank is higher than your carburetor again. So a lot of times they would continue the hill in reverse. Anyway, they went on to lunch and had a good time. So the following year, they decided to do it again on the way to the same lunch stop. And this time they had talked about it enough that there were 13 cars on the tour. And I don't know if all 13 cars made it or not, but they did the hill and they went on to lunch. So now the third year, it was still a lunch tour, but they actually decided to spend about an hour and a half trying to go up the hill. And now there were 26 cars. And they had made 4 classes for the cars for different weights and everything of the cars. They had a standard forward, Ruxel forward, which is an underdrive, any reverse, and the speedster class. And it was still Long Beach Club only, just part of the lunch tour, but somehow word got out. They got a little blurb put in the newspaper, and several hundred people showed up to watch, and they counted nearly 200 cars parked around in the area, the people that came to watch. They spent their hour and a half, 26 cars attempted the hill several times, and they went on to lunch. So now the following year, the 4th year, they decided to actually make it an event. And it was an invitational. They had invited other Model T clubs, and they only had 7 classes, and about 2,000 spectators, they estimated, and watching 40 Model Ts assault the hill. And the fastest time timed with a stopwatch that day was 14.5 seconds. From there, it just really grew. The following year, they opened it up to the public, and they acquired some timing lights and time clocks, and added more classes, more participants, more competition, more speed, faster times, and it just kept going and going from that point on. It became nationwide famous, even world famous. It was written up in several newspapers. Several national automotive magazines had articles on it over the years. And, you know, people spent countless hours and thousands of dollars building a dedicated car to climb the hill, all for bragging rights and a trophy that was made by club members out of old Model T parts. There was no cash awards or anything like that, just the trophy and the bragging rights. The fastest car over the hill, the driver was awarded the King of the Hill and a crown that was made out of Model T parts also. The fastest time ever on the hill was 7.18 seconds. So the cars were getting very fast. So for over 20 years, Long Beach Model T Club annual hill climb was the event to prove your Model T and to prove your skill as a builder. But increasing insurance requirements and residential development in the area eventually just put an end to the fun.
Now, do we know did everybody get lunch?
I believe everybody got lunch. The cars, those original 7 cars made it up the hill.
Now, another thing, if a car did not make it up the hill, you would bring a crane in, a helicopter, how did we handle that?
During the competition, at that time, there was no center divider on the street, and they would, the Model T brakes don't work. They don't work very well going forward. They don't hardly work at all going in reverse. But they would immediately turn the car around and either continue on up the hill in reverse or get it pointed down the hill and go back down the hill. But there was only one car ever, I think, in the whole 20 years that kind of got away. It ended up just going over to the side of the road and hitting the dirt embankment, and there were no injuries, no damage or anything like that. But one problem out in over 20 years.
Well, that's pretty good. Quite a history. Well, as we mentioned, many years later, over 40 years later, an opportunity arose to do a reenactment about this particular event, this Hilltime event. To talk about that, we want to welcome automotive professor Leonard Glick. And Leonard is the gentleman who actually coordinated the reenactment. So Leonard, tell us about how that all began.
Well, actually, John, it was a little bit of a fluke. It was late in 2023. I remember I was watching a blog, and the person that had written it showed a sign, a picture of a sign that had been given by the Chamber of Commerce to the City Council of Signal Hill to commemorate the hill climb. And it was somewhere on Hill Street. And so I went to look for it, and I couldn't find it. And so I started researching, where is this sign? And so I remember going online, and I found names of people that were in city government, Signal Hill. And so I started making some phone calls and some emails to try to find somebody who could tell me where did the sign go. And finally, I ended up talking with the city manager at the time. And so I was asking him about the sign. I told him that I was part of the club. The club has been around since 1954. And I just wanted to find the sign. And he said that, well, he didn't know, but he would look into it. And I thought, well, okay, I'll probably never hear back from this guy. But at the same time, when I was looking for these people's names in the city government asked the question about the sign, I found that the next year, 2024, was the centennial of the city. And so at the end of our conversation, I said, by the way, the hill climb was such an important part of the city's history, and I see that next year is the centennial of the city. Would you be interested in a reenactment? Because I saw there were a lot of activities that were planned for the centennial year. And I was surprised that he bought it. And so he put me in touch with the director of Parks and Recreation and Library Services, who had been given the job of coordinating all these various city activities for the centennial. And I started working with her, and that's basically how it came about. And I figured once I talked to the city manager, he said he wasn't interested in the reenactment. I thought, well, I better talk to some of the powers in the club, because I had offered that before I had asked anyone in the club if they would be interested in doing the reenactment. But then when I did talk about it, it was received well.
What was the club's reaction?
I think they were all in on it. They were happy that it happened. But again, had it not been for that sign, I don't know if this would have happened.
Well, very well done. There were only 10 drivers that had the opportunity to take it up this very steep hill that Jeff defined, and one of those drivers was Lana Stevens. She drove quite a way to get there, and she drove up this hill. So Lana, tell us about how you prepared for this event and the action of your experience next to driving this very steep hill in your Model T. And what Model T type did you drive?
Well, it is a 1916 touring car, and it was my dad's first Model T. And he bought it the year before I was born, so I grew up with that car. And when I was an adult, he taught me, of course, how to drive it. And my dad at one point had 7 antique cars, so there was always something fun to drive that my dad had. But we loved Model T together. We loved doing Model T stuff together. So after he taught me to drive, I started doing car shows with him, with our whole family. He had so many cars that there were plenty of people to be able to drive them. So we would do car shows together, and my dad and I did tours. And we loved going down to Model T Garage and working on them together. So it was just something really cool that my dad and I did together. And it was at the T Garage that we learned that Signal Hill was entertaining the idea of doing an event again. So that was, my dad and I had talked about that and thought that would be a really cool idea. And I think I got notified somewhere in early September that I had been invited to participate in the hill climb. And sadly, my dad had passed away suddenly just in August. So that was, I participated in it to honor his memory. So it was a big honor for me to be able to do it. It was a little scary too, because that was, I think, my first Model T outing without my dad as a safety net. So fortunately, the Long Beach Model T Club has always been a huge support to me. So it went well. And as for planning and preparation, yes, 1,000 times yes. I was obsessed. I really wanted to do this event and do my dad proud. So, and I had a theory that of a shifting strategy that would give me a little bit more torque towards the top of the hill. And so in order to test my theory, I had to take the car out and run a hill. So I found a hill in DeVore near San Bernardino, and I ran that car up the hill, and I practiced over and over and over again until I had the shifting down pat, and that's what I used to climb the hill, and it worked out well.
Well, just like the race car drivers, there's a strategy of how they win too. Well, excellent. Well, Glenn, you were also one of the handful of drivers to drive up this hill. Tell us about your experience getting ready for this event and actually driving up the hill.
Well, I didn't really get ready for it. I kind of wished I had gone over there and gave it a test run. But I was kind of surprised when we got there that it was a fairly long run before you hit the hill. I thought you were going to start right at the bottom of the hill. And I got a Warford transmission, which gives you underdrive, straight through, and overdrive. So I planned I would just flip the forward and low, take off with forward low, go to high, and then shift to Warford in a second. looking back at it, I kind of think I've been better off just put the Warford in second, which is the way the thing was built basically. And just run it out in first gear and hit the hill in high gear. But that's what I ended up hitting the hill in high gear anyway, about halfway up. Went down into one, of course I couldn't keep up with one at a time.
Well, speaking of that, when was your time?
I don't remember.
Have I line of your time?
No,
Yeah,
no.
I think it was
my-
seconds and not days, correct?
Right, it was, but
If they're not
my
days.
biggest care was that I not stop on the hill, because I just couldn't imagine what that would be like to be standing on the brakes and free flying backwards all the way down the hill. My biggest goal in life was just to get up it.
Glenn, how about you? Was there a contingency plan should you not make it up the hill?
No, but I sure was hoping it was gonna make it up the hill. And it actually went up quite easily. It wasn't, didn't have any struggle. Just didn't go as fast as I'd like to.
Well, excellent. Well, to all of you, Jeff, Leonard, Lana, Glenn, we appreciate you joining us on the Model T Chronicles. And who knows, perhaps another time we will see you on another hill. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for listening. Any questions for Jeff, Leonard?